What if a widowed CEO lied to his board that he'd secretly been married for a month, and the only woman he trusted enough to play his wife was his daughter's nanny, a woman whose own child was gone, and whose heart had already learned how to break? Before we begin, please like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next slow burn stories of love, healing, and the quiet choices that change a family forever. The city outside Callahan Tower glowed like a circuit board. From the top floor, the streets looked tiny. Headlights streamed in white and red lines. Billboards flickered. Somewhere far below, people hurried home with grocery bags and tired feet. Inside the boardroom, everything was still. 12 men and women sat around a polished table. A slideshow glowed on the wall. Numbers and charts and neat bullet points. No one was looking at it. They were all looking at him. "Noah," the chairman said at last, breaking the silence. "You've seen the article, I assume?" Noah Callahan kept his gaze steady. The light from the city cast faint reflections on the glass wall behind him. "Yes," he said. On the table in front of him lay a printed page. A photograph took up most of it, him at the Callahan Group Gala, laughing, a woman's hand resting on his chest. The headline curled above in bold letters: "Widowed CEO gets cozy at company gala. Is Noah Callahan moving on?" One picture, one fraction of a second at the wrong angle. "We understand it may be nothing," another board member said carefully. "A harmless moment taken out of context. But investors are nervous. The merger is delicate. They want stability. They want clarity." Noah steepled his fingers. "It's been 2 years since Claire passed." The chairman continued. "We have given you space to grieve. We've supported every decision. But the market is watching. The press is circling. People are asking, who is Noah now?" He could feel their eyes pressing on him. Not unkind, not exactly, just heavy. He cleared his throat. "I understand the concern," he said. His voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. The truth was simple. The woman in the photo was a donor's wife. She had leaned in to tell him a joke. The photographer had captured the half-second where it looked like intimacy instead of small talk. It wasn't a scandal, but it looked like one. And in this world, appearances often meant more than facts. The chairman looked at him. "So we're asking directly," he said, "is there anything you need to tell us? Are you involved with someone in a way that could complicate the merger?" Noah opened his mouth. He heard himself say, "No, there's no scandal here." He could have stopped there. He should have. But then he thought of the headlines, of the investors calling, of his mother's voice on the phone, tight with worry, of his little girl at home, the one person who still thought he could make the world safe. He thought of how tired he was of being the man stuck between what people assumed and what he knew. The next words came out before he could catch them. "I'm married," he said. "I have been for a month." The silence that followed was total. Someone's pen clattered to the table. A woman at the far end blinked fast. "You're married," one man repeated. Noah kept his face still. "Yes," he said, quietly, "for personal reasons. My family life isn't part of my business strategy." That sounded like something he would say. Controlled, self-contained, untouchable. Inside, his heart pounded. The board exchanged looks. No wedding announcement, no photos, no whispers. But Noah was known for privacy, for doing things without spectacle. If he said it was true, most of them were willing to accept it. "For now, all right," the chairman said slowly. "Then we can move past speculation. We'll issue a brief note to that effect if pressed. Congratulations, Noah." A few polite nods, a couple of murmured well wishes. The meeting moved on to graphs and timelines. Noah barely heard any of it. He had just told 12 powerful people that he'd been married for a month. He didn't have a wife. He had a daughter and a nanny, and exactly one person he trusted enough to ask what he was about to ask. Rain hit the penthouse windows in long, shimmering lines. Noah stood in the hallway of his home, outside the guest wing, hand raised to knock and not quite touching the wood. Behind him, down the corridor, his daughter's room glowed softly with a nightlight. A faint melody from a music box floated out whenever the door opened. He looked at the closed door in front of him. He thought of all the speeches he'd given in boardrooms, all the negotiations, all the risks he'd calculated. Nothing felt as risky as this. He knocked. The door opened a few seconds later. Rachel Moore stood barefoot on the rug, in a pale sweatshirt and soft flannel pants. Her dark hair was damp from a recent shower, lifted slightly by the static of the dry air. Her eyes warm brown, steady, searched his face. "Is Emmy okay?" she asked immediately. "She's asleep," he said. "Out cold." She conked out halfway through the second story. Rachel relaxed a fraction, hand dropping from the doorknob. "Good," she said. She didn't step back to invite him in. She stayed in the doorway, a quiet barrier between him and the rest of the room. "Is something wrong?" she asked. He exhaled. "I need to ask you something," he said, "and it's going to sound insane." She waited. Outside, wind lashed against the glass. "There was a photo," he began, "from last night at the gala. It's being spun into something it's not. The board is jumpy. Investors are asking questions. The merger." She lifted a hand slightly. "English?" "Noah," she said gently. "Not boardroom." He stopped. "I told them I was married," he said. Her eyebrows shot up. "You what?" "I told them I've been married for a month," he said. "They believed me. They needed to. For now." Rachel stared at him. "And the wife?" she asked slowly. "Is she imaginary too?" He shook his head once. "She isn't imaginary," he said. "She just doesn't know yet." It took her a second, then her eyes widened. "No," she said automatically. "No way. Whatever you're about to ask, the answer is..." "Rachel," he said, "just hear me out." She pressed her lips together. "Fine," she muttered. "Say it." "I need to keep the board calm long enough to finish the merger," he said. "1 month, maybe 2. They don't need a wedding slideshow. They don't need details. But there will be dinners, events, questions." He met her gaze. "I need someone I can trust," he said. "Someone who knows Emmy. Someone who cares about her. Someone who won't sell this story to the highest bidder." The realization settled between them. "You want me to pretend to be your wife?" she said. "Yes," he said. "Just for a month." She laughed once, a short sound of disbelief. "You're out of your mind," she said. "You can say no," he said quickly. "Nothing changes for Emmy. You still have your dream. I'll find another solution." The idea of another solution made his stomach twist. He did not want some stranger in his house, at his table, in his daughter's orbit, just because the board needed a photo. Rachel glanced down the hallway, toward Emmy's room. The nightlight glowed under the crack in the door. When she'd arrived a year ago, Emmy wouldn't speak to her, wouldn't speak to anyone. Tiny hands clutched the hem of her pink dress, eyes fixed on some invisible spot. On the third day, Rachel had found her curled behind the living room curtains, knees hugged to her chest, silent tears on her cheeks. Rachel hadn't asked questions. She'd sat down beside her, opened a picture book, and read aloud. At the last page, small fingers had reached out, searching for her hand. The next morning, a whisper had followed Rachel into the kitchen. "More story, please." Trust was slow work. Delicate, holy. Rachel thought of that now. "If I did this," she said slowly, "Emmy can't know." Noah blinked. "Of course not," he said. "I mean it," Rachel said. "She can never find out it's pretend. Not later, not in a fight, not in a slip. Kids remember that stuff forever. She already lost one mother. I will not be another lie." His chest tightened. "I understand," he said. "I promise." Promises had broken in Rachel's life. Men had made them and left anyway. Doctors had made them and shrugged when it was too late. Still, there was something in Noah's eyes that felt less like a salesman and more like a man barely holding things together. She crossed her arms. "What would this look like?" she asked. "Day to day. We'd do what we already do," he said. "You'd live here, why, we'd have dinners together. On certain nights, you'd come to events with me as my wife. We'd hold hands when people are watching. Answer small talk questions. No kissing on cue," she said. A flicker of surprise. No, he said, no kissing on cue. She nodded once, and after the merger, she asked, when it's done, he said, we can quietly separate from the story. Tell people we've chosen privacy, or we can tell them nothing. I don't know. We'll decide together. But the pretending lasts a month. She finished. If that, he said. The wind rattled the windows. Rachel thought of a tiny hand clutching a stuffed rabbit, of a little boy's empty crib, of the way Emmy had started to smile again, in brief, bright flashes. She thought of the letter tucked in her nightstand from the bank, the one she pretended not to see. Why me? She asked softly. He frowned. What do you mean? You could have anyone on your arm, she said, gesturing vaguely at him. Some polished socialite who knows which fork to use. Someone who's not. She caught herself. Me, she finished. You mean someone who doesn't make chamomile tea every night and convince my daughter to eat her broccoli by arranging it into smiley faces, he said. A corner of her mouth twitched. Those are highly specialized skills, he added. Not easy to replace. Flattery won't fix how ridiculous this is, she muttered. No, he said, but maybe honesty will. He took a slow breath. I don't want a stranger in my house pretending to be part of our family. He said, if I have to lie to the board, I want that lie to protect something real. Emmy trusts you. I trust you. Her throat burned. You're sure about this? She asked. No, he said, I'm not sure about anything anymore, except that I can't let her world fall apart because men in suits are nervous. Silence stretched. Rachel thought of Emmy's sleepy voice. More story, please. All right, she said at last. I'll do it. His shoulders lowered, just a little. But, she added, the first time you treat me like a prop instead of a person, I'm out. Fair, he said, and no one gets to fix me for the cameras. She said, if I'm going to stand next to you, I stand as me. He nodded. Understood, he said. She stepped back. Then we start tomorrow, she said, before I change my mind. The first morning, Rachel woke up in the Callahan penthouse as Mrs. Callahan on paper. At least the air felt different. Not because of the luxury. She'd walked these halls for months, padding from Emmy's room to the kitchen and back on soft rugs that cost more than her entire previous apartment. It was the weight of watching herself from the outside. A breakfast tray waited at her door. Tea, toast, berries arranged carefully in a small bowl. Under the teacup lay a handwritten note. Thank you. N. She folded the note and slid it into the drawer without thinking. By the end of the week, internal memos at Callahan Group had been updated. Noah's assistant quietly informed a few key people. A brief line in a trade paper mentioned that the CEO had remarried in a private ceremony, surrounded by close family. No photos, no venue, just enough to shift the narrative. At home, the show began. Plates were set for 3 at dinner instead of 2. Emmy in her pink dresses, Noah at the head, Rachel across from him. The first Sunday, Noah's mother arrived. Eleanor Callahan stepped into the penthouse in a navy coat, silver hair pinned neatly, pearls at her ears. Her posture was straight, her eyes sharp. Rachel met her in the sunroom. So, Eleanor said, stirring sugar into her tea, you're the woman who managed to pull my son out of mourning. Rachel folded her hands in her lap. I'm just trying to take care of the family, she said. That's a bold word, Eleanor murmured. Family. Her gaze flicked to the living room, where Emmy sat on the floor, carefully lining up wooden blocks. We'll see, Eleanor added. That evening, they all sat at the dining table, real silverware, real crystal, candlelight. It felt like a stage. Halfway through the meal, Emmy put down her fork. Daddy, she said. Noah looked at her, startled. Emmy rarely spoke in front of other adults. Yes, Bug, he asked. I made you something, she said. She slid off her chair, disappeared down the hall, and returned with a folded card. She handed it to him with both hands. On the front, drawn in crayons, were 3 stick figures holding hands under a crooked heart. Inside, in big, careful letters, it read, Happy birthday. Daddy, I love you. Noah's throat closed. He read the words again and again. He hadn't heard those 3 words from her since Claire died. Back then, she'd been too little to understand them. Later, she'd been too hurt to say them. Now they were there in marker. He pulled her into his lap. "Thank you, sweetheart," he managed. "This is the best thing anyone's ever given me." Over her curls, his eyes found Rachel. Something soft and shaken moved across his face. Later, long after Eleanor had left with a quiet goodbye and a thoughtful look, Rachel patted down the hall in her socks to check on Emmy. A small whimper sounded from inside. Emmy tossed in her bed, cheeks damp, fingers clutching her stuffed rabbit. Rachel sat on the edge of the bed, stroked her hair, then gently gathered her into her arms. She rocked her, humming a lullaby she hadn't dared sing since her own baby's funeral. The melody was muscle memory. She didn't notice Noah in the doorway until the song ended. He stood there, half in shadow, hands braced on the frame. He didn't speak. He just watched the way Emmy's breathing slowed, the way her small body softened against Rachel's chest, the way the lines in her tiny forehead uncreased. He had not seen his daughter that peacefully asleep in 3 years. When Rachel finally looked up, she saw him. They didn't say anything, but something shifted, quietly, for both of them. The line between pretending and being had begun to blur. Transformation did not arrive with trumpet blasts. It seeped in like warm water, like chamomile steeping in a mug. Each night after dinner, when the kitchen was cleaned and the city outside had turned from gold to dark blue, Rachel made tea. Chamomile for Emmy, chamomile for herself, plain hot water for Noah at first, one for the ghost in the office if he ever comes out, she joked one evening, stirring honey. He stepped into the kitchen with his sleeves rolled up, expression unreadable. "She always did that," he said. "The ghost?" Rachel asked. "The tea," he said. "Claire, every night, she said rituals gave kids something to hold on to." Rachel held out the spoon. "Then maybe you should do it," she said. "For Emmy." He hesitated. "For Emmy," she repeated. He took the mug. That night, he sat on the edge of Emmy's bed while she sipped, small hands around the cup. He brushed a curl away from her forehead. When her eyelids drooped, he took the cup and set it aside, then stayed until her breathing went deep and even. The next storm that rolled through the city, they stayed inside. Rachel had pulled old photo albums from a box in the study, meaning to organize them. Instead, she ended up on the rug near the fireplace. Albums spread open when Noah walked in carrying 2 mugs of hot cocoa. She smiled at the sight of him, rumpled, tie loosened, hair a little out of place. "Peace offering," she asked. "Call it nostalgia," he said. They flipped through pages together. Claire laughing on a beach, wind whipping her hair, baby Emmy covered in frosting. Holidays, a younger Noah with less weight in his eyes. He paused at one photo of Claire and Emmy at the shore, the sky behind them clean blue. "She was laughing when I took this," he said. The umbrella kept blowing away. She called it the perfect day. His fingers trembled on the edge of the picture. Rachel placed her hand over his. "She looks like someone who loved hard," she said. "She was," he replied. His eyes shone, but the tears didn't fall. They hovered, caught by habit. Rachel leaned in and brushed away one that threatened to slip. The gesture was small. It nearly undid him. The next morning, when Rachel walked into the living room, she froze. Above the fireplace, where a black and white photo of Noah and Claire had stood alone for years, there was now another frame. A picture of 3 people. Noah, Rachel, Emmy in her pink dress, grinning with wild abandon. Rachel laughing, hand on Noah's arm. Noah looking not at the camera, but at them. No one had told him to print it. No one had asked him to put it there. He didn't mention it. Somehow, that made it mean more. The gala came and went like a dream. Rachel wore a deep navy gown she'd borrowed from a stylist Noah's assistant insisted on hiring. Her hair fell in loose waves around her shoulders. When she stepped out of the car at his side, lights flashed, faces turned. Noah's hand hovered at the small of her back. She kept her chin level, her smile small. Inside, at their table, board members chatted about projections and launches. One of the directors turned to Rachel. "And what does the new Mrs. Callahan think of all this excitement?" she asked, smiling. Rachel opened her mouth. Before she could speak, SIP, Noah reached for her hand. Not a staged movement, not rehearsed. His fingers laced with hers on the white linen. She's been my greatest support, he said simply. A quiet warmth moved through Rachel's chest. He didn't look at her. He didn't need to. She felt the difference in that touch. It wasn't part of the act anymore. At first, Rachel thought it was her imagination, a flicker in the corner of her eye. The same car parked outside Emmy's preschool 3 days in a row. A man pretending to read a newspaper across from the park bench where she often sat. Then, one quiet Thursday, confirmation came. Emmy was in her favorite pink dress, fingers sticky with grape jelly from their picnic. She curled into Rachel's lap under an old maple tree, babbling softly. Rachel whispered a half-song, half-daydream into Emmy's curls. Then she heard it, the clicking of a camera shutter. Her head snapped up. Too late. A man walked away, camera slung low, melting into the afternoon crowd. 2 days later, the headline hit. Callahan's new wife, or just the help, Nanny turned stepmom in scandalous photo. The blurred image beneath showed Rachel holding Emmy, cropped tight to suggest intimacy. The text beneath was sharper than the image. A hired caretaker passed off as a devoted wife, a grieving CEO using his nanny as a prop to save his image. Was it love or damage control? The fallout was immediate. Investors murmured. The board panicked. Social media did what it always did best judged. Worse, old whispers resurfaced. The car crash, Claire's death, the timing of Noah's supposed new marriage. Rachel stared at the words until the screen blurred. He was being dragged through the mud again, this time with her as the dirty smear. She couldn't let that stand. Not when she'd seen how hard he'd fought to keep the company steady. Not when she'd started to care far more than she'd planned. So she began to dig. A watermark on the photo led to a freelance agency. A call to an old friend from her teaching days, now a journalist, led to a media registry. The registry led to a chain of payments. The money trail ended at one name. Julian Miles, senior investment director, a man already rumored to resent Noah's leadership in the merger. Rachel's heart pounded. This wasn't just gossip, it was sabotage. One evening, she waited near the garage exit of Callahan Tower, hood pulled up, phone clutched in her hand. When Julian's sleek car pulled out, she slipped into a taxi and told the driver to follow at a safe distance. They ended up in a nondescript underground garage on the far side of the city. The concrete pillars hummed with fluorescent lights. The air smelled of oil and damp. Under one of the flickering lamps, Julian met with two men. One held a folder. The other showed images on a tablet. Through the zoom on her phone camera, Rachel caught snippets. More where that came from. Board will lose its mind, you'll get your bonus. Her pulse hammered. Proof. She stepped forward, trying to get a clearer shot. Her heel scraped against a loose piece of metal. The sound echoed in the cavern of the garage. One of the men turned. Hey, he said, who's there? Rachel froze. A broad-shouldered man in a leather jacket started toward her. You lost. Sweetheart, he asked. She took a step back. Just leaving, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. His hand closed around her upper arm. It didn't hurt yet, but the threat was there. Then a different sound cut through the space. Tires screeching. A black car rolled into view. Engine low. It stopped in a clean line of light. The driver's door opened. Noah stepped out. Rain still clung to his coat from the streets above. His expression was sharp enough to cut steel. She's with me, he said. His voice was quiet. That made it more frightening. The man's grip loosened. This your girl, he asked. She's my daughter's to mother, Noah said. Touch her again, and I will make sure your name disappears from every contract in this city. Something in the way he said it made even the cement seem to shiver. Julian stuttered. Noah, I can explain, he began. I know exactly what this is. Noah cut in. And you're finished. He didn't stay to watch Julian scramble. He took Rachel's hand and led her to his car without another word. They drove in silence for several blocks, city lights smearing across the windows like wet paint. Finally, Noah pulled over near the river. He turned off the engine and rested his hands on the wheel. Why didn't you tell me, he asked. Rachel stared at her phone. I didn't want to worry you, she said. I thought maybe I could fix it, before it got worse. He leaned back and rubbed a hand over his face. Denise, he started, then corrected himself. Rachel, if something had happened to you tonight. He stopped. His jaw worked. Emmy would have lost another mother, he said quietly. The words hung in the air like a flare. Rachel's breath caught. What did you just say? She whispered. She already sees you that way, he said. And if I'm honest, he turned to her. So do I, he finished. Her eyes burned. He reached into the back seat, grabbed his jacket, and draped it over her shoulders. The night wasn't cold. It wasn't about warmth. It was about presence. He didn't say anything else. He didn't have to. In the silence, the truth settled. Whatever this had started as, it was not pretend anymore. Not for him, not for her. The illusion might have survived the headline. It might have survived Julian. It might have even survived internet jokes and investor gossip. It could not survive Eleanor Callahan. Noah's mother had always been a woman of quiet strength and sharper instincts. She played the role of polite matriarch perfectly, but she missed nothing. For weeks, she watched. She watched the way Emmy ran to Rachel first when she scraped her knee. She watched the way Noah's eyes softened when Rachel entered a room. She watched the photo on the mantel. Something didn't add up. One gray Wednesday, Rachel returned from dropping Emmy at preschool to find Eleanor sitting in the living room, a folded paper clenched in her hand. I called the courthouse. Eleanor said, without preamble, there's no marriage certificate for you and my son. Rachel's stomach dropped. I also checked with my attorney, Eleanor continued. No private ceremony. No sealed record. Nothing. She stepped closer. Would you like to explain, she asked, or shall I make assumptions? Rachel's hands shook. I can't, she said. Eleanor pressed her lips together. I knew Noah was hurting, she said. I did not think he'd fabricate a marriage to save his position, and I certainly did not think he would involve his daughter, or you. It wasn't like that, Rachel whispered. We didn't. You let that little girl believe you're her mother, were you? Eleanor said. Her voice cracked for the first time. She already lost one, she went on. Now you'll leave too. Rachel had no answer. Whatever this had become for her, for Noah, for Emmy, it had started as a lie. That was a fact. Whatever this is, Eleanor said, straighter now. It ends today. She left the room before Rachel could respond. Rachel packed in silence. She folded the pink sweater Emmy liked to sleep in, the scarf she used on cold walks, the toothbrush by the sink, the crayon drawing taped to her mirror, 3 stick figures holding hands, a heart above them. She placed each item carefully into a bag as though she were boxing up moments she wasn't ready to lose. Her decision wasn't for herself. It wasn't even for Eleanor. It was for Noah, whose name had already been dragged across enough headlines. What had begun as protection was now a liability. Sniffling came from the doorway. Rachel turned. Emmy stood there in her pajamas, hair sticking up on one side, stuffed rabbit dangling from her hand. Where are you going? She asked. Rachel's heart squeezed. I have to go, sweetheart, she said gently. Why Emmy's lower lip trembled. Sometimes grown-ups have to fix things, Rachel said. I need to give your dad some space. Tears spilled over in Emmy's eyes. But your mommy, she burst out. The word hit Rachel like thunder. What did you say? Rachel whispered. I don't want you to go. Mommy, Emmy sobbed, running into her arms. Rachel knelt and hugged her tight, her own tears spilling freely now. I love you, Emmy, she choked. So much. Behind them, a voice broke. Emmy. Noah stood in the doorway. He had heard everything. The word mommy, the sobs, the promise of leaving. His knees felt weak. He crossed the room slowly, kneeling beside them. His eyes were wet. For the first time since Claire's funeral, the tears fell. She's not going anywhere, he said hoarsely. Rachel shook her head. Your mother is going to expose everything, she said. If I stay, it will ruin you. The board will tear you apart. They'll say you used your daughter. Used me. If you leave, he said, Emmy loses you. And I lose the only person who's made this house feel alive again. She met his gaze. Is this still a performance? She asked quietly. Because if it is, I can't be part of it anymore. His mouth opened. No words came. Silence answered for him. She stood, her bag heavy in her hand, and walked past him. He didn't follow. Not yet. The tears on his face were not those of a man losing an employee. They were the tears of a man realizing he had fallen in love too late to name it, too afraid to speak it, and now seconds away from losing it all. The boardroom had never been this full. Executives, shareholders, legal advisors, PR specialists. Everyone who mattered to the company sat around the table, faces tight with tension. On the screen behind Noah, a slideshow had just ended internal audit, market forecasts, but no one cared about numbers. They were here for the truth. Rumors had grown too loud. Anonymous sources, questions about the legitimacy of his marriage, legal searches that turned up no certificate. Even Eleanor's absence from the room felt like a verdict, and the chairman stood. "Mr. Callahan," he said, "before we proceed with the vote on your continued position as CEO, we ask you plainly, is it true? Was your marriage fabricated to protect your public image?" Noah looked out at the room. Some faces were sympathetic, others cold, most just scared for their stocks, their futures, their reputations. None of them had been in his living room when his daughter called another woman mommy. He opened his mouth. The doors at the back of the room opened. Heads turned. Rachel stood there. Her hands trembled slightly, but her eyes were steady. Her hair was pulled back in a simple knot. There was no attempt at glamour, just her. The room held its breath as she walked down the aisle between chairs. No one stopped her. No one dared. She reached the front and did something no one could have predicted. She took Noah's hand. He stared at her, shock and something like hope flashing across his face. She squeezed once. Then she turned to the board. "I never thought a pretend marriage would make my heart feel so real," she said. A few pens dropped. "I was hired to care for his daughter," she went on, voice shaking but clear. "We agreed to lie, to protect a merger, to protect investors. I told myself it was for the greater good." She swallowed. "Somewhere in the middle of that lie, I found a family." She said, I love his daughter, and I think I love him too." The room buzzed. Noah tightened his grip on her hand. He stepped forward. "I lied," he said plainly. Gasps. "At first, yes, it was to protect the company," he said. "I told the board I was married when I was not. I asked Rachel to play a role she should never have had to play." He looked at her. Then, in the middle of all that pretending, he continued, "We stopped pretending." He turned back to the board. "I built Callahan Group from nothing," he said. "I have given it everything I have. But today, I am stepping back. Not because of scandal, not because I'm forced, because I need to rebuild something more important." He glanced at the door, in the direction of home. "A life with them," he said quietly. The silence that followed felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. The chairman blinked. "You understand what you're saying," he murmured. "I do," Noah said. "You can appoint an interim CEO. The merger will survive without me. It may even do better. You'll have someone whose photo isn't in the tabloids every third week." A few people actually smiled, wary and small. "As for the story," he added, "we'll issue a statement. I'll take responsibility. Leave Rachel and Emmy out of it as much as possible. They did not ask for this." He looked back at Rachel. "If you still want to walk away after this," he said softly, "I won't stop you." Her eyes shone. He squeezed her hand again. This time, he did not let go until they were out of the room. 3 months later, the city bloomed. Trees shook out new leaves. Cafes set chairs outside again. A soft kind of hope hung in the air. On a quieter street between a bookstore and a cafe, a small sign above a door read, "Little Lanterns, a place to grow." Inside, the walls were painted in warm colors. Shelves held sensory toys and soft books. Posters showed diverse kids in capes, smiling. At the front of a cozy classroom, Rachel stood with a clipboard in hand, nervous and proud. Her first class for children on the autism spectrum was about to begin. It hadn't come from a grant proposal or a corporate initiative. It had started as sketches in a notebook in her nightstand, a maybe someday dream. Now, thanks to a donation listed only as "from a friend of Little Lights Everywhere," The dream had a floor, a roof, four walls, and a light switch. At a small table near the window, Emmy sat with crayons, her dress covered in tiny stars. She glanced up every few seconds, just to make sure Rachel was still there. Parents began to arrive, guiding their kids in some shy, some flapping their hands, some humming. Rachel greeted each one, explaining the schedule, pointing out the calm corner with beanbags, the no loud sounds box, the picture cards that would help their kids know what came next. She was in the middle of showing a little boy where the blocks lived when the door opened again. This time, it was Noah. He wore a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, no tie. He looked less like the CEO on magazine covers and more like the man who sat on the floor counting puzzle pieces with a 5-year-old. In his hands was a wild bouquet, not roses, not lilies, sunflowers, daisies, lavender, a bit lopsided, beautiful. Rachel's breath hitched. "You came," she said. "Of course I did," he replied. He handed the flowers to a parent nearby, who grinned and found a jar for them. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope. Her name was written on it. "I tried to write an email," he said. "It sounded wrong, and her fingers trembled as she opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper, folded in half. The handwriting was careful. "The broken watch has finally stopped," it read. "But my heart hasn't. Not once. Not since you walked into our lives. If you'll let me, I want to start over. No lies. No pretending. Just us." "Noah." She looked up. He was already lowering to one knee. Behind him, a few parents gasped. A teacher in the hallway peered in and squealed quietly. The kids mostly just stared, curious. In a small velvet box in his hand lay a simple ring, the band shaped like intertwining branches. Not flashy, not a headline, just a circle of promise. "Rachel Moore," he said, voice steady but thick. "You turned a penthouse back into a home. You made my daughter smile again. You made me remember who I was before the noise." He glanced at Emmy. "And you've been mommy for a while now, even if we were too scared to say it," he added. He looked back at Rachel. "I don't want to pretend anymore," he said. "I just want you. Will you marry me?" For a moment, Rachel couldn't move. The world narrowed to his face, his hand, the ring. Then Emmy stood. Her curls bounced as she ran forward, her little sneakers squeaking on the floor. "Say yes, Mommy," she called, voice ringing clear. Rachel laughed and sobbed all at once. She dropped to her knees, pulled Emmy into a hug, then turned to Noah with eyes that no longer tried to hide anything. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes." Applause broke out. Some kids clapped just because everyone else was. One little boy covered his ears, so Rachel reached out and squeezed his hand in solidarity. Noah slid the ring onto her finger. It fit as if it had always been meant for her. He stood, pulling both Rachel and Emmy into his arms. There were no board members, no reporters, no stage photos, just a small classroom, a sign on the door, and 3 people who had chosen each other for real this time. No scripts, no secrets. The lies that had once built walls between them had been replaced with something better. Honesty, a little girl's laughter, and the warm, steady light of a lantern that would not go out.